Howdy. This here is the lecture for quiz number 2. Quiz number 2, it says, is on, don't tell me, John. Chapter 2 of the Business Cycles book, the first 10 pages. Now, that's a book that I have forthcoming from Cambridge University Press, and it's not out yet. So I just gave you all the PDFs from the draft, which I think is pretty much exactly like the final version. But that way you would have it conveniently and free. And this is only assigning 10 pages, but it's our first foray into economic theory. So I wanted to take it kind of easy on you at first. Not that, it's just, some of y'all might not have been exposed to too much economics before. So, like I said, we will start simple. And this particular chapter is the theory chapter, and I think we end up with 3 quizzes on this same chapter. 1, 2, 3, I think so. The basic idea here is to, before we can get to all the various controversies about the way the economy works and so forth, you really need, the debt and the deficit, what else have I got under? Climate change, communism and socialism, all these kind of controversial issues, what causes inflation. We really need to have a kind of a basic grasp of what drives the macroeconomy in the first place. Now, in the last video, and I'll go into a little bit more detail this time, I told you that Keynes and Keynesian are not the same thing. This is mainstream economics, neoclassical economics, or the economics that argues that the economy is pretty much stable and will automatically fix itself if there's ever any problems. Hey, I just thought of something to read to you. I hadn't thought about this before I set this up. And let me read this to you real quick. This is a quote from Christina Romer, who is not related to the Paul Romer I mentioned to you last time. Well, she might be, like back several generations or something like that. And she was the chief economist for Barack Obama, or the chair of his Council of Economic Advisors. And she is a mainstream economist. She's a relatively left-leaning mainstream economist, but she's still a mainstream economist. So here's where I want to be. I want to be in chapter 1. Here's something she said about business cycles. Where is it, John? Oh, for crying out loud. Sorry, I didn't even think to show you this until I was already talking about it. Found it. Just as there is no regularity in the timing of business cycles. And a business cycle is an expansion, recession, expansion, recession, expansion, recession. All right, that's a business cycle. The cycle is that going up and down with expansions and recessions. She says, just as there is no regularity in the timing of business cycles, there's no reason why cycles have to occur at all. The prevailing view among economists is that there is a level of economic activity, often referred to as full employment, at which the economy could stay forever. All right, so again, this is something, you might expect that from a right-leaning economist. A right-leaning economist might say, hey, leave it alone, it'll take care of itself, don't worry. You wouldn't necessarily expect that from a left-leaning economist, from somebody that's Barack Obama's head of his Council of Economic Advisors, and yet that's exactly what she said. And so this is a widespread view. I told you in the last video, we had a speaker come in, talk about AI and how it would affect labor. And he said in the course of his presentation, of course, we're assuming full employment. Well, for crying out loud, what are we talking about? All right, so that's not the perspective I'm coming from. I'm coming from his perspective, from his book from 1936, right in the middle of the Great Depression. And he argued that the system is inherently unstable. Christina Romer argues that the system is inherently stable, but sometimes stuff can knock it over, like COVID, or like the 1973 Arab oil embargo. These were external events that acted on the economy and knocked it out of full employment. He's saying, can COVID happen? Sure, but we don't need COVID. There's already an internal cycle. All right, there's already an internal cycle. So that's what we're going to be getting to here eventually. All right, I want to build up to that. But let me give you a quick preview of what it's all about. And now I'm going to go back to the page that we're actually going to be talking about here in a minute. Here we go. On chapter 2. Let me give you a preview first of where we're headed. I think that might make the story easier to follow. All right? And I want you to think about the business cycle. Hopefully this doesn't fall over on top of me. As you have no doubt already gathered, it is simply leaning up against some blinds. All right, we've got an expansion, which is the up part. And we've got early, mid, and late, and then recession. Early expansion, mid expansion, late expansion, and then recession. I want you to think about each of these three periods. I want you to think, first of all, about early expansion. We've been in recession, all right? So what's typically going on during this period down here? Well, generally speaking, entrepreneurs are hesitant. They're becoming more pessimistic because the recession's been going on for a while and they expect it to end at some point. But they're still somewhat hesitant to invest, all right? And investment, it's going to turn out, is, as I suggested in the last video, the most important variable in the macroeconomy. When firms are building new factories, when they are retooling their old factories, all these sorts of things, these are extremely important determinants of whether or not we are in recession or in expansion. Investment drives the system, all right? So, why would they do any investment at all here in early expansion? I mean, it's not early expansion yet. At some point, they have to decide, I guess we need to start investing again, right? Why would they do that? Well, all right, so imagine you're in the middle of the recession, and let's say you run a grocery store, and you've got 5 checkout lanes, and one of them breaks. One of the cash registers break, and you think, well, yeah, we're in the middle of a recession. I really don't want to do the outlay to repair one cash register. I guess we'll run with 4 lanes instead of 5, right? Then another one breaks down, you know. And meanwhile, the bad memories of the recession are fading, all right, as we go on here. There's going to be several other factors we'll get to later in terms of the financing of these things. But eventually, entrepreneurs are forced to replace aging equipment. All right, they are forced to replace. I mean, to take things to a ridiculous extreme, what if all 5 registers break down? Well, now I can't sell anything. I got to invest in some new registers, or at least invest in having the old ones repaired. So that's typical of early expansion. Early expansion, we're going to have eventually the pressures to replace physical capital build. Pressures that you avoided back during the recession because you're like, well, I'm not going to be buying a new cash register in the middle of a recession. We're not going to need it anyway. All right, there's nobody coming to the store. But eventually, as things wear out, you have to replace them even to maintain the current level of sales, let alone any anticipated level of sales. So we have a big jump in investment right here. I'm going to use I for investment. And generally unexpected. It's going to take me until the next week, the quiz 3, to tell you exactly the background here. But it's going to turn out that in the macroeconomy, surprises are really important. Surprises are really important. They shift people's attitude, all right? This is a positive surprise. They've been in the middle of a recession. All of a sudden, investment jumps up. And sure enough, by the way, statistically, this is the period when profits jump the most, this early expansion. How long am I talking about? Maybe a year, maybe a year. I mean, it varies, but maybe about a year. All right, so now everybody's like, all right, things are looking good. Let's keep investing. So through mid-expansion, which I'm going to say 4 or 5 years, again, it varies from cycle to cycle, but 4 or 5 years, And there's a lot of investment going on now. People are building new restaurants. Old restaurants are being retooled. We're having new shopping malls built. No, I guess not anymore. But anyway, stuff like that. But it's not a surprise. We don't have that happy surprise we had down here. We have a surprise. We had a happy surprise here. Here things are going well, and they expected them to go well. All right. Here is the key. By the time you get to late expansion, investment starts to fall. Not because entrepreneurs are pessimistic, but because, think about this, how much money do you make from building a restaurant? Nothing. You don't make anything, all right? The only way you make any money at all is by opening the doors of that restaurant and having customers come in. In fact, you've just taken on a whole lot of debt, no doubt, in your restaurant. I'll make sure things are in focus here. Yeah, there. When I move, it moves with me, doesn't it? All right, so I'll try to stay back here. So you've taken on a whole lot of debt. You need those doors open. So firms are starting to cut back on investment up here. They are starting to reach the capacity that they thought they needed in order to meet consumer demand. So they cut back on building restaurants. Why? Because they're pessimistic? Absolutely not. They're still optimistic, and that creates a problem. When the investment goes down, sales actually go down, but the expectations were still high. Expectations were still high. Disappointment. All right, so we had a happy surprise down here. You can see that. Yep. We're going to have a sad surprise up here. And what Keynes said in the general theory in 1936 was that people will replace their air of optimism, they were too optimistic, with an air of pessimism, and we come down the other side. All right, so that's going to be the basic story I'm going to build on here. I'm going to give you all the building blocks for it. But that's the essence of it right there. So the chapter here opens up with a little description of various business cycles. It then tells you a little bit about different types of cycles and so forth. Nothing here I need to go over in great detail. But injections and leakages. That's the place to start. All right, so we're going to build up this argument here, or build up this explanation. And in order to do so, the place I want to start is with something called injections and leakages. Now, there are types of spending that are injections into the income stream. And there are things that are leakages from the income stream. Well, let's first have a quick look at GDP. All right. Total gross domestic product, which is the dollar value of all goods and services. Oh, here, John Harvey has it right here on this page. The total market value of all goods and services produced within the U.S. in a given time period, usually a year. Total production is equal to consumption. All right, so the total dollar value of all the stuff we produced is equal to the dollar value of the consumption goods we produced. Investment. And that's physical investment, not financial investment. It's physical investment. Government spending, that's exports, and we subtract imports, all right? So the total GDP is consumption spending plus investment spending plus government spending plus exports minus imports. Why minus imports? I don't want to make a big deal out of this. It is in a footnote in the book, but and I don't want you to worry too much about this, but why would we subtract something? If this over here is the total dollar value of the production of all goods and services, why would we subtract something? Because C, I, and G also include stuff we bought from foreigners. We're not netting that out. This is all consumption, including stuff you bought from China. all right? It's all consumption. So we're going to net it out at the end. We're going to net it out at the end. Now, we didn't have to measure it that way. We could have always done this, the accounting to where this only meant consumption of American goods and services, but that's not the way we do it. The way we do it is that's total consumption, total investment. Even if that grocery store buys a cash register from Japan, it's counted right there, all right? Government spending. Even if the U.S. buys fighter jets from England, all right? It's still government spending, so we're going to net it out at the end. And of course, exports is stuff we sell to people in other countries. All right, so two things about GDP. Two things about GDP, gross domestic product. First thing is that we often deal with what they call real GDP rather than just GDP. Just GDP is the dollar value, of all goods and services produced in a given year. Real GDP is the inflation adjusted number, all right? So the dollar value, what if all prices doubled? Then GDP would look like it doubled. Wow, we made twice as much stuff as last year. No, you made the exact same amount. It was just twice as expensive, all right? So that's important to bear in mind. So real GDP takes out the price changes as well as we can. And these things are not exact, but it gives us a pretty good idea. It takes out the price changes. So real GDP is what we normally deal with because we're really concerned with the number of things we produced, to a large extent more than the prices. It's not exact, but generally speaking, well, for example, later we're going to say that when GDP goes up, it's going to raise employment and therefore lower unemployment. That's because you made more stuff, not because you made more expensive stuff, because you made more stuff. So we're really better off looking at real GDP, right? So real GDP is inflation adjusted. Second thing I want to tell you about GDP sometimes you will catch me speaking of GDP as if it were the total expenditures for all those things. Let me write GDP down here again. GDP equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. That is the total expenditure on all consumption goods, investment goods, government goods, things we sold to foreigners, netting out, of course, stuff we bought from China. It is also the amount of income earned, all right? GDP is not just the amount we spent, it's also the amount we earned. And it's the dollar value of all the output. How is that so? I'd love to tell you. I've been using this example, good Lord, over 3 decades. Let's say you're at the grocery store. Here's your cart. All right. There's a place at the front of the cart where you put like cat litter or beer or something like that. And you take all your stuff up to the register. And at the register, they figure out the price and they run it over the little scanner. And they say, that'll be $35.72, all right? That'll be $35.72. What was your expenditure? $35.72. What was the income of the grocery store? $35.72. What was the dollar value of all the stuff in the cart? Pretend there's no taxes. Dollar value of all the stuff in the cart, $35.72. Income, output, and expenditure are the same number in a closed system. They are not the same number for you. The amount of income you have is not equal to the amount of your expenditure. Sometimes this is more than this, sometimes this is more than this, all right? So they're not the same for you, but they are for a system. This goes back to that fallacy of composition stuff to keep in your head. Oh, in a closed system, if we're counting everybody that made a possible transaction, every time you make an expenditure, you create income for somebody else. And every time you earn income, it's somebody else's expenditure. So therefore, in a closed system, those two numbers must be exactly the same, and you made expenditures for something, Could be a service, could be a good, whatever, but it's also the dollar value of all the output. So GDP is the total dollar value of all the income earned in the United States. It's also the dollar value of all the expenditures. It's also the dollar value of all the output. It is all three of those things at once. And this is not just a sort of a theoretical thing that we talk about in the back office. Did you know that when they calculate GDP in the real world, they do it two different ways? Firms have to turn in their taxes every year, right? And they're gonna write down on their taxes how much stuff they sold this year. So the U.S. government can add up everybody's expenditures from what firms report. Now they can figure that out. Also, you got to turn in your income taxes. You got to turn in how much income you earned. So the government has those data too. The government has both of these. They calculate it both ways. Do they get the exact same number? No. Because people round stuff off and people leave stuff off either on purpose or by accident. But they know they should be the same number, and they're always double checking themselves by looking at both of them. So GDP is total income in the United States. It is total output. It is total expenditure, all at the same time. That is not true to micro level. It is true to macro level, and for these reasons. All right, there's some GDP stuff. Now, what determines GDP? All right, let me see what else I got in my book here. If I marked everything else out. No, this is where we are. What determines GDP? All right, and this is where I use the the injections and leakages approach. I'm a real big fan of this. Imagine a bucket. Right? And that bucket has a spigot or a faucet over the top, and it's got a hole in it. You've got water pouring in, you've got water leaking out, and a current water level, right? Now, the water level is total GDP. The injections are continually adding to GDP, and I'll go over what those are here in just a second. And the leakages are continually subtracting from GDP. Well, heck, I'll tell you right now. The injections are investment, government spending, and exports. I'll explain all this in more detail in a minute, but let me give you sort of an overview right now. The leakages are savings and taxes and imports. Well, let's think about those individually real quick. Think about how when you get a paycheck, you get income, that obviously equal to GDP. I just told you that a second ago, that GDP adds up to everybody's income, right? If you spent all your income every year, you would be continually sort of generating that income. You got paid $100,000 this year and you spent $100,000, you made it income for somebody else. You generated that much economic activity. Your $100,000 payment over the course of the year generated $100,000 worth of economic activity. But what if you only spent 90 of it? What if you saved 10? Well, then your act of saving has tended to contract the macroeconomy over the next time period. This doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but what it's saying is that when you save, you subtract from the overall level of economic activity. You got paid $100,000, you spent 90, which means that you earned $100,000 in income, but you only generated $90,000 in income for other people by saving the $10,000. You created a leakage. Or what if the government taxed away $10,000? What if they took $10,000 away from you? I sure would have liked to spend all $100,000, but I only ended up getting $90,000 after taxes. So unless the government spends that money, if they simply take it out of the economy, it's a leakage. It causes the economy to contract. Taxes cause the economy to contract because they take income out of people's pockets. Or what if you spent $10,000 of your dollars on foreign goods and services. All right? That means, remember, GDP is domestic. GDP is the United States of America. All right? If you spent $10,000 on foreign stuff, then your $100,000 in income only generated $90,000 worth of American economic activity. 10,000 of it went abroad. 10,000 of it went abroad. So any subtraction, anything you save, anything that's taxed away, and anything you spend on imports tends to lower GDP. So imagine, it's a hole in the bucket. Any of these things lower the water level. But wait! At the same time, there's these possible leakages down here. There's also injections. When firms decide to build a new restaurant, that's an injection. That's a brand new injection of income. When TCU builds 10,000 new dormitories all across the campus, that's an injection. That's an injection of brand new income that didn't exist otherwise. They go out and they hire some construction company to build something, and it's kind of a one-time deal, which of course ends up being the problem in the cycle, right? Because once they're done with the dormitory, they lay those workers off. But, or what if the government sends everybody a $1,200 check because it's COVID? Or what if foreigners buy our stuff? All of these are brand new injections in income that didn't exist before. Get caught up in a second. What I want to show you first of all is that it must be true in equilibrium. This is so much harder when you're not sitting right there and I can't see what your faces are and you can't raise your hand to ask questions and stuff. So I have been doing this for a long time, so I think I can anticipate a lot of things, but it's not the same, is it? It's all right. It's more convenient. You can take the class from anywhere, but it's not the same as being there. All right. In equilibrium, injections have to be equal to leakages. Let's say when you walked in and you saw a friend in their backyard playing around with a faucet and a bucket with a hole in it, and your friend's like, hey, I got it to where it's just staying exactly even. Why would it stay exactly even? Because there's as much water going out as there is coming in, all right? So your friend has played around with the faucet until they've got it to where it's exactly even. It won't change right here. It's going to stay right there. And why would that be true? Because there's as much coming in as there is going out. All right, the volumes are exactly the same. The volumes of water being injected, the volumes of water going out. But you said, hey, let me try. And you turn up the faucet a little bit. You turn it up a little higher. You know what's going to happen then? The water level is going to go up. But as the water level goes up, it's going to create greater pressure on this hole here, and that's going to go out faster. And so if you turn up the faucet a little bit, it will find the new equilibrium point. The water level will go up until this outflow is the same as this new inflow you just created. And so what you did was, by your injections, you increased the level of GDP. You increased the level of economic activity. Your friend says, get away from there, you jerk, I had it just right. And then they turn it down, only they inadvertently turn it down lower than it was at first. So now they have a lower level of GDP than even when they started, but it'll find an equilibrium, right? You turn this down, and the new lower flow, the water level will drop until the water pressure pushing out right here is equal to what you did up here, right? So it's going to look for an equilibrium point. If you turn it off completely, the water is going to flow down to here until there's no water going out. So you turn it off completely, there's no water going out. So they end up being equal once again. Only problem I have with my analogy is if you turn the water way up, it starts to pour out the top. So I guess you have to count that as a leakage too, out the top. But otherwise, whatever you do to the faucet, the hole will eventually catch up. The hole will eventually catch up. If you turn it up a little bit, then the water level will go up until the leakage down here is equal to the injection. If you turn it down, then the water level will drop until the leakage is equal to the new lower injection. That is exactly the way it works in the macro economy. These three variables right here, as they fluctuate, they tend to drive the level of GDP. And then these three tend to follow. These three tend to adjust to whatever these three have created. All right? These tend to be in the driver's seat. Have I got a color I haven't used yet? Purple, believe it or not. Well, other than up there. All right. They're generally in the driver's seat. When they fluctuate, they cause GDP. And notice, by the way, I have nowhere on here for consumption. Because consumption is a passive act. Consumption is what you do because you have a certain level of GDP. All right. There have been a few isolated cases in U.S. economic history where consumption has changed first and then changed the level of GDP. And we really don't have a place to put that on my analogy here. But it's been very rare. Generally speaking, it's been these three things, and quite honestly, it's just been that one. Investment is by far the most volatile component of GDP. As you'll see in the book, by far the most volatile component of GDP. In fact, quiz number 3 will be just about learning how investment works. All right, so we're just sort of setting the stage here for what drives GDP. I, G, and X. All right, and this tends to follow down here. Now, it doesn't have to. Doesn't have to. What if the government raised taxes, raised the tax rate? Well, then that would be like making the hole bigger. And so, yes, then it would flow down, and it would cause this to flow down until the levels of how much was coming in and how much was going out were equal again. But, or if we imported a lot more, all right, that'd be the hole getting bigger. Or if people saved less money, that would be the hole getting smaller. But those things tend not to change very. We don't change taxes every other day. We don't change saving behavior. We did after like the financial crisis and after COVID. That was a very drastic situation, but generally speaking, they don't change a whole lot. Our imports don't change a whole lot, right? These, especially I, next to most important is G, and then X is we sell stuff, but we don't really generate a whole lot of income from that, generally speaking. So, summary here, let me make sure I haven't skipped something. Oh, there's my example right there, the garden hose. All right, and well, let me just give you some data here. Let's see here. Where do I start here? Over that. Okay. I can't find the number. Oh, here it is. 14.6%. All right. 14.6% is how much investment tended to change from quarter to quarter. From 1948 to 2020, 14.6%, all right? So 14.6% up, 14.6% down. In fact, 1/3 of all changes in investment over that period were complete changes in direction. It wasn't just 14.6, 14.6, 14.6, it was going up. It was 1/3 of the time it was coming back down again, all right? So that's how much it tends to change from quarter to quarter. That one's like 4% from quarter to quarter, right? So it's about 3 times as volatile. And you can read all that. It's not real important to this. All right. And that we're almost done here. Let me see. I'm 33 minutes. That's about right. And then we'll be starting the uncertainty in investment stuff. Okay. So, once again, think of it this way. There's injections into the income stream that cause GDP to go up. There's leakages that cause it to go down. The leakages don't change that much. The leakages are fairly stable. So the size of the hole stays about the same. But your friend's been drinking and their hand is like volley, it's going back and forth on the faucet, right? So this sucker's going up and down because this keeps changing. That's the way the real world works. And there's a pattern to it. It's not just random. There's a pattern to it. Investment tends to go up during early and mid expansion, and then it tends to go down during late expansion, and it drops tremendously during the recession. So that's what we'll talk about. Okay, a couple more things about investment, and that's it for that. Let me wake up my computer here and have another look at the quiz. I had it open here, and now it's gone to sleep. Oops. Okay, there it is. Then a couple more things about investment. Yeah, there's the quiz. I'll make sure I covered everything I wanted to. Not terribly important to you, but there's net investment and there's gross investment. Gross investment is how much investment took place in total in a particular time period. Net is how much firms actually added to their total stock of capital. So, for example, let's say that your restaurant added on a new wing and also replaced some of the kitchen equipment. Both of those things are in gross investment, but only the adding the new wing shows up in net investment. The redoing the stuff in the kitchen, upgrading or replacing some of the equipment, well, that was just replacement investment, all right? So, which is very important. Don't get me wrong. And it counts every bit as much in terms of raising the water level in the bucket as anything else. But it's not the same as net investment, which is actually adding to the country's stock of physical capital. Also, that does include housing, all right? So included in overall investment includes when they build houses. How much of that is a percentage changes somewhat from year to year. Let's see, I have it in here somewhere. It's about 20%, as I recall. Again, it's not on the quiz, and inventory adjustment. Okay, this one, and fortunately, again, you don't need to remember this, but I want you to have heard it to get a sense for it. If a firm produces 10 cars for sale this month, and they sell 8 of them, that means they added 2 to inventory, right? Check it out. C plus I plus G plus X minus M. We sometimes put X minus M in parentheses because it's the net trade. It's the exports minus imports. All right, so some company builds 10 cars for sale this month and they sell 8 of them, all right? Well, those 8 are going to show up under consumption, you know, however much they are each, 20,000, so we have $160,000 of the sales there, whatever. What do we do with the other 2? Where do we put the other 2 cars that they produced but didn't sell? I mean, they created economic activity, they created income, we got to put them somewhere, all right? We put them there. Inventory adjustment goes in investment, all right? Because we've got to take account of that production somewhere. So it's about 5% of investment tends to be inventory adjustment, but it has more importance than that, as you may see in some later chapters when we talk about particular periods of history in the U.S. But what's happening to inventories can be a signal of which direction firms are thinking of going. If inventories are accumulating, firms are like, crap, let's cut back on production. So accumulating inventories can be a negative sign for economic activity. On the other hand, what if they had made 10 cars but sold 12? Is that possible? Yes, if they had 2 in inventory. But what they would have to do is they would have to put a negative 2 in investment. They would have to put a negative 2 over there to take into account, well, those, we already counted those a while ago. We counted those back when you made them in the first place. Now we're just shifting where they are from one place to another, so we have to take it out. So inventory adjustment, if inventories are going down, then firms are likely to want to increase production, and so that's a positive sign. But again, that's not going to be a big factor. I'm looking through the quiz right now. All right. Yeah. Okay. I did not mention absolutely everything, but I mentioned the stuff that was the hardest to understand. So study and good luck, and may the force be with you.